do a couple fast little tote bags today because I like a little shopping bag that I can take with me. And this little cute one is reversible. You only need a half a yard of fabric of each fabric, or if you buy a half a yard, you can self-line it. This is a great one for scraps. If you have scraps left over, this is a really cute, easy bag. This is the bag that my kids would make in my sewing class after they made their pillowcase. And I'll link so you can find the pillowcase pattern. It's one of the very first videos I made, and it's super long because I show a lot of seam finishes. And I'm not sure if it's time-stamped. I need to go time-stamp it, but there's a lot of ways to make a cute pillowcase in there, and they're really cute. Unlike this is my NBA OKC Thunder because I taught in Oklahoma City area back in the day. After they made this project, they went to this one because these don't really need a pattern. We would just draw it out right on the fabric, which is what I'm going to show you. And then they had a little bag that they could carry their supplies in to class every week. And it was a great way for me to help keep them organized, but also to make them start falling in love with sewing and seeing how versatile and useful it was. And once they did that, then they could put their little projects in it. Like this is the little shorts or sleeve pants that they would make next. And they could just carry all their supplies in their bag. And because everyone picked out their fabric, no one had the same bag. It was really easy to keep track of whose things were whose. So we're gonna make this little bag. And then I have a bunch of just scraps left over that I'm gonna turn into a little bit larger shopping bag that won't be lined, but will be nice and sturdy for taking places with us. So let me clear all of this out of the way. To make this cute little bag, like I said, you only need about a half a yard. And here's a few scraps that I have left over. I'm going to do mine in just a simple calico, and I'm going to line it in just a plain ivory. And I usually would just draw this on one fabric. So you take one of the fabrics to the wrong side, but we're going to just fold it over, and we're going to take a marking pencil, and we're going to draw on it the size we want the bag. Now remember seam allowance. So this one is a 13 by 14 rectangle. It's 13 wide by 14 long before seam allowance. And I'm sure I would just use what I had. So we're going to do the same thing with this. You can use your tape measure or your ruler. My ruler's so well used that I've just about worn the numbers off of it. So first I'm going to just draw a nice straight line for the top. And you do want seams. Like this is folded, I'm actually going to cut that open. I do want a seam on each edge because it helps with the stability of the bag, and it also helps with the corners to make it stand up. You also need an interfacing, in my opinion, for this bag to give it this weight. If it doesn't have interfacing, it gets very soft and rumply, which is fine, but it may not be what you want. So I'm going to interface this whole thing just a medium weight. The heavier you go, the more it will stand up, but also the harder it is to work with when you're turning it. So I'm going to just mark down my 14 inches here from my straight line, so I have a nice straight top. Okay, so I hope that shows up in the camera, but I have two dark lines. And now we're just going to do our 13-inch line across. And you could make this a complete square. When it's sewn, it won't look like a square anymore. And I'm just going to go from the fold and then just cut open my fold. This little bag, if you're using it for a shopping bag, is the perfect size for if you're going to get like 2 liters. You can get 2 of them in there, and it's about all you'd want to carry in it. It's also good for quick little trips. Okay, so now I have my little square, and I'm going to grab my other piece of fabric. And you can do this 2 ways. You can either just cut this out and then use that as a pattern to cut your other piece, or you can stack them and cut. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just cut this. The other thing you need is your straps, and the straps are 22 inches long for this one, and I have 2 sets of those. So you need 2 22-inch by 2-inch, 22 by 2 straps. And to do that, I can actually do that right now. And you can have a longer strap. You could easily make this a longer strap if you really want to make it. This is just about perfect for the shoulder, but if you want a little bit longer, you could. You could also add a pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and do my 2 by 11 2 times. The nice thing about this is you really can customize this to what you want. If you want a wider bag or a narrower bag, easy to turn this into like a wine, a bag to carry a little wine bottle in. And now we're just going to cut this apart, and we're going to lay it right on top of my lining fabric and do it again. Now when I sew this, I just use 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I just straight stitch it right at the sewing machine. And see, I have enough left over, I could easily get a second bag if I wanted to, or make a little matching zipper tote. But this is a great way to start using up those scraps. And if you have just small scraps, you could even have the front and the back different. You could patchwork it and put it together as a patchwork. So I'm going to use this for my pattern, just like that. I don't need both of them. And I'm going to come down a little bit from my torn edge because this torn edge is just frayed. I would like to cut it off. I just think it'll make it a little simpler in the sewing side of things. And I'm looking at this. I can only get one strap here, but I can get a second one out up there, so we're good. All right, so here's my bag pieces, ready to go. And now I'm going to just cut out some strap linings, and we're going to interface all of this. So everything I'm cutting out of these fabrics, I'm going to cut out of interfacing as well. All right, there's one strap. You definitely want to interface these straps. It really helps. And this is, I think, curtain lining fabric that I'm using for the bag lining. It works great. It's got a little bit more stability to it. Now when we interface, we're only going to interface the decorative side. I'm not interfacing the lining, so we just need to interface one side. Now I'm cutting this without any pins, but if you struggle keeping all of your pieces together, put pins down or redraw it even. And always draw on the wrong side using either a fabric marker or like just a regular pencil. Those things will come out the easiest. Okay, so here's my bag pieces. So I have two decorative and 2 lining of each fabric, and I'm going to cut the same thing interfacing. I won't show you that. And this bag is ready to go. So here's my first bag. We're going to sew. All right, now I'm going to show you how to cut out the second bag. Now this one's a little more going to be based on what I have left of my scraps. So I have these scraps of this fabric, and this is a canvas weight. So I'm actually going to use, I think I'm going to use this one. I'm going to use this for the bottom of the bag, and then the top of the bag is going to be out of this little bit lighter weight fabric. And that just makes the bag more sturdy when you're using it. So I'm going to go ahead, this will be my straps. And I'm going to just see how much fabric I have to work with first of all. I'm going to flip it over because I can see the angle there. Make sure I have enough, and then let's see what I've got of this one. These were fabrics that I made placemats and napkins out of, not to go together, though they are similar in color. So this is what I have at the top. So I can get out of this one, let's see if I can get them close to the same size. Oh yeah, I'm good. Okay, so I'm going to leave all of this. I'm going to have just the strap out of this. I'm not going to line my strap. It's going to be just self-faced out of this stuff. So this will be my strap. I can do about an 18-inch wide bag, which is great. That's a good grocery size bag. 18 inches by, let's see what the narrowest part of my fabric is. So it would be about 10 inches deep. Okay, well it won't when it's folded under. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off right here. Okay, so this is going to be my bottom, and now I'm just going to even this out with this shortest edge. So whatever this is, do you guys do this? Do you bury everything under your stuff? This is 10 3/4. I'm going to flip it over so I'm not marking on the right side. And I'm going to make my 10 3/4 across so that it's nice and straight. So now I have a nice rectangle, and I'm pretty much going to make this bag as big as I can. Some of this is going to get wrapped under to the bottom side of the bag, so it's going to not be this deep on the side when we're done. So that's the bottom half of my bag. And now we're going to just cut whatever's left of this the same. Now this one I've been cutting very carefully along the grain line to keep my little checks straight. So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way across right here. I'm going to just cut this to the size I need. I'm following, because this is a woven in check, a woven in plaid. I can just follow that line straight up. And I'm going to trim off my selvage edge right here, same way. And so now I have these two pieces, and I think what I'm going to do is this. So when it's folded under, this top will be double layered and I can interface that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm so excited. That's going to be great. Now I just need to cut the other one the same size. Barely made it. Okay, so there's that. Now we're going to just cut some straps. I'm going to cut this in half, so I have 2 straps. That'll end up being about 27 inches. And I'm going to make them whatever width this allows. I'm using what I've got. So this currently is 7 inches. I'm going to lose a little bit for selvage. Nice long straps. Alrighty. We are ready to go now and interface the parts that need interfaced and start sewing. So I'll see you back in the sewing room. I've interfaced all of my decorative sides for this simple little tote bag, and then I've left alone my lining pieces. So I have my straps interfaced and I have my bag pieces interfaced. And all we're going to do now is we're going to take one lining and one regular of our straps, put them right sides together, and we're going to sew down the long sides. You don't need to sew the little ends because we're going to turn it through anyway. So and I'm doing about a 1/2 inch seam allowance on everything. You can do a 1/4 inch, and we're just straight stitching this at the machine because it's all lined, so we don't have to worry about seam finishes at all. So we're going to sew both of our little straps up, and then we're going to come to our bag pieces. We're going to take the one that's the right side bag, the decorative side, or our side A, preferred side. If you're using a directional fabric, make sure that you don't get one flipped. Make sure that they're facing up and you know the top side. And we're going to sew 3 sides. So this is the top. We're not sewing the top. I'm going to sew down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side for the decorative one. And for the lining, here's the top of my bag. See my little pins at the bottom hanging down? We're going to sew down the side and to the pin. So we're going to kind of turn our corner and sew to that pin on both sides. And we're going to leave this little hole open and this whole thing open at the top. Okay, so I'm going to sew those pieces and come back and show them to you and show you how we're going to pin it together for putting it together. This sews together so quickly. My kids, once they learned how to do this, everyone got tote bags and pillowcases and stuff for Christmas. The kids would often sew gifts to give for Christmas, and this was one of their favorites. They could give it to grandma and their mom and their favorite aunt and their best friend, and they could make matching ones, and it's a great simple project. So I'm actually, when I do the lining side, I usually start at the bottom here, and I'll do a little back stitch, sew to the corner, turn, and then up, and come back and do the other side so I don't forget. It's real easy to accidentally just sew this shut and then have to come back and rip it open. So we're going to sit at the sewing machine. I'm going to sew those 3 items, straps, right sides together, or side A of my bag, 3 sides, just like a U, and then we're going to sew our lining pieces. So now that we have gone around our bags on 3 sides and we've left open a little hole in the bottom for turning, we're going to do 2 things. So here's my strap that I've sewn, and I've put a safety pin on one side. It's open on these little short ends, and I'm going to push my safety pin through. We're turning our strap inside out, so we're going to push our safety pin in. So here's my lining. Here's my right side with the interfacing, and we're going to push this in between between the 2 layers, between the decorative fabric and the lining fabric, and we're just going to shove it in there. You shove in our safety pin and pull up. We're turning our tube inside out. We're skinning our snake, is what I used to say to the kids. But we're really not skinning it. We're just turning him inside out, making him pretty. So we're going to just pull this up, and it takes just a few minutes. It's a little stiff, which is how it should be because you have interfacing. So the interfacing side is going to make it a little stiffer and take a little bit more time. On the strap, I didn't sew 1/2 inch seam allowance. I sewed 1/4 inch seam allowance on the strap and 1/2 inch on the bag. And that's just my personal preference. I just think it gives a little bit wider strap and it makes it a little easier to turn. If you do 1/2 inch seam allowance, you've got a skinnier strap and it's a little harder to turn, but it will turn. So we're going to keep going like this, and then when we're done, we have a strap that's lined. Now I went ahead and pressed this one, so you want to press it so that all the lining's on one side, so it's nice and flat and you don't see the lining peeking through. At this point, if you want to top stitch, you could top stitch your strap, which is what I did on this one. It has top stitching on the handle, and it just keeps your handle from flipping around. Like, it's a good way to make it nice and secure, but you certainly don't have to do that. So once we've flipped both of our straps, take our lining and our bag. Now right now you could sew it together and you just have like a bag, but it doesn't have a flat bottom. And if I personally want a flat bottom on my bag. So we're gonna, here's my lining. We're gonna put our finger in to the corner like this. So we're going to push down our bottom seam and our top seam on top of each other. So I'm gonna turn it this way so you can see, here's the side of my bag, here's the top of my bag, and I'm kind of pulling this out like this into a little triangle. And what has happened is, see this little point, this is my seam allowance, but my seam lines up perfectly on top of itself, like this. And we're gonna do that on both corners that are sewn. We're gonna put a couple pins in it. Now, if you're new to sewing, and even if you're not, I would take a ruler and I would draw a straight line across, because we're going to stitch this down. This is what gives us a flat bag. And you want it to be exactly the same. So if I do 2 inches on this side, I want to do 2 inches on this side. The deeper you sew this triangle, the wider the bottom and the shorter the side. So you have to think about just how wide you want the bottom of this bag. See, this one's just a little over 2 inches. It's not very wide, but it's just enough to make it easy to put cans and bottles and things in it. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one, about 2 inches down on both corners, but it looks like that. And we do that on all of our corners. This was always the part that when I taught that confused the kids the most. And I don't know why, because you're really just making, we call them cat ears, because that's exactly what it looks like when it's sewn. It looks like you have little cat ears. So the other thing you want to make sure is that you make your seam allowance go the same direction so you don't end up with a twist in the bottom of your bag. So this one, I have the seam allowance pinned this direction. If I pin this one the opposite direction, there's a twist in the bottom of the bag, and that's always just not going to lay nice. So you want to make sure you pin them the same way. And we're going to do the same thing for our decorative bags, or the decorative side, the side A. Make sure you backstitch everything. Backstitch, backstitch, backstitch. Even, like here's our little opening. If you don't backstitch at that opening, it starts to pull apart when you turn it through. So here's my little cat ears. And here you can see my corner, like this. So I make a triangle. And what's happening is the side seam and the bottom seam end up on top of each other. So that we're going to line those two seams up, put a pin in it, so that I have a nice little triangle like that. And now I'm going to stitch straight across. So here are the lines drawn. Here they are on my lining. So now I'm just going to straight stitch across that. I've got my 2 straps. I have all of my kitty ears sewn on my lining and my bag, and now we're going to put the whole bag together, and we're pretty much done with this. So I've gone ahead and marked, see all these pins, where I want my straps to go on this bag. And we're going to take our little strap, and I'm going to kind of go like this with it, because I don't want it to get twisted. So you can see it's straight, and I'm just letting it make a little U, and then turning it out. And I'm going to pin right side strap to right side of bag. And we're leaving the bag so I see the interfacing side for now. So I'm just lining up the inside of my strap with that pin. All of the stuff's going to get shoved down inside the bag, so I'm going to let the handle just fall to the inside. I'm going to pin this one on. All my little straps pinned in there. You see that? So those are pinned in. Now I'm going to take my lining, and I'm going to, currently I have it the wrong side. There's my little kitty ears. Make sure when you're doing your kitty ears that you have 2 important things. You make every little triangle the same depth on all 4 corners, and that you have the seam exactly lined up, your bottom seam to your side seam. If you don't, your bag's going to twist. So I'm going to flip this around to the right side now, because we're putting right sides together, and look, there's my nice little flat bottom, like that. So see, there's my bottom. There's my side. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to slide it into the bag, and because I flipped it around, I now have right side of lining to the right side of the bag, and now we're going to pin together at the side seam. And because I was careful how I pushed my side seams, the lining side seam goes one direction and the bag side seam goes the other, and I don't end up with too much bulk at the side. If you kind of line up when you're doing your kitty ears and you turn everything the same direction, it automatically works out this way for you. So we're going to just pin these on, and see, here's the direction my side seam is pinned down here where it's stitched, so I'm going to make sure and push it that way when I'm pinning at the top. And we're going to sew all the way around this bag, completely around. You don't have to leave any holes for turning because the hole for turning is down in the bottom here. So we're going to sew this 1/2 inch. Make sure your straps are caught, and if you have a removable board, remove it. Just sew around my circle. Now I have lining down and right side or side A up because it's the interfaced side, and by doing that it just gives more stability. And if there's any movement between the lining and the upper piece, it gets taken care of with the feed dogs. All right, and I've made my way around. I'm going to cross my old stitching here, and the bag is almost completely done. So now I'm just going to give it a quick haircut. So here's my bag. I'm going to pull the lining out so now you can see how they're attached. And now I have this hole in the bottom of my lining between the kitty ears. Here's my hole that I left open. I'm going to put my hand in that hole. You want to make the hand big enough, or the hole big enough for your hand. And I'm going to come through and I'm going to grab the straps. And be gentle. I'm going to pull my straps through. And then I'm going to come to a corner way down here. I'm going to grab that. We're going to kind of let it fold in on itself. It looks terrible, like you're really squishing up your bag for a minute, but it doesn't matter because when we pull it through, and this is why we backstitched. If you don't backstitch, your threads will start pulling out. And look, I'm giving birth to my bag. And you just gently tease it out and flip it around. Ta-da! So now that it's flipped around, we can pull out our corners here. And I always like to make sure that those little kitty ears get pushed to the bottom of the bag instead of standing up in the side. So I'm just going to push those down. And if you need to, you can actually put your hand right back inside the lining and arrange it. And now we have a bag. So the last thing we're going to do before we push the lining down inside is we're going to come here to this hole. And we're going to just fold it in on itself, 1/2 inch. And I'm going to put a pin in the middle, and we're going to edge stitch it close. So we're going to stitch really close to that edge. I'm just going to straight stitch it. You could zigzag it if you want to, but it always looks a little more finished if you straight stitch it. And we're going to start on each, so we're going to make it a little bit longer than the hole. We're going to start in the old stitching, and that just makes it sturdy because we just pulled our whole bag through that hole. It needs a little security. So we're going to stitch that little hole shut. That's the edge stitching. Got both layers, and we just barely stitched along the edge. Now, if you want to, you can top stitch at this point, but we're going to just push in our lining to the inside. And I usually will give it a good press at this point, press around the upper edge. And here's our little straps, and there's our little bag. So I'm going to give it a quick little press. So here's our little bag, all finished. There's the lining on the inside. You can see it has a nice little square bottom, so it'll sit. Isn't that cute? This is an easy bag. I have a video where I show you how to make little zipper pouches for like pencils. If you wanted to make a little bag that your kids could take their coloring books and their crayons and that sort of thing in, make them a cute little bag out of their favorite character. There's so many licensed prints out there right now. This would be a great way to do it. Or even just like an art bag to carry your sketchbook, that sort of thing. This also could be easily adapted if you turned the handles to the corners, and it could become a bag that could be hung on like a walker or over the handles, that sort of thing, or wheelchair. So easy little super fast bag, does not take very much fabric, and very adaptable. If you want to add pockets, before anything's done, when you just have your squares, go ahead and sew the pocket on then, either to the inside or the outside. That's the perfect time to put the pocket on, and then put everything together. So this is bag 1. We're going to go to bag 2 now. Now for bag 2, I've already interfaced everything. So I did not worry about interfacing my handles this time, but I could have because of how I'm going to be sewing the handles. And it's a heavier fabric. And I did not interface the bottom because I'm not lining it. But I did interface this top because it's a lighter weight fabric. So here's my tops, and we're going to just sew the two tops. There's two ways we could do this actually. Because I'm doing this in two pieces, I could sew these together like this first, if I wanted to make like a square, and then just sew it together sort of like I did the other bag, but not line it. But what I'm going to do is, because I'm folding this in half, I'm actually going to treat these as two different pieces. So I'm going to take my bottom here, right sides together, and making sure this isn't directional. Do my flowers go both directions? It does. Okay, and I'm serging this one together. If you're not serging, you can do this all straight stitch and then zigzag next to it, but I'm going to go ahead and sew a little U. So I'm going to sew 3 sides and leave the top open. So I'm going to do that really quickly at the serger. We're still going to do kitty ears though, but it'll all be serged by the time we get to the kitty ears. All right, so I'm serged around all my sides. So I have a bottom of a bag. I'm going to go ahead and take my straps. Here are my straps. And I'm thinking about this really quick. I'm kind of wishing I hadn't cut them in half. I'm kind of having some regret over that actually. I have 2 straps. I just took my piece and folded it in half and sewed it longwise. And then I went back and top stitched it. So I have 2 straps. And I have my bottom that I already showed you. Here's my sides. And what I'm going to do now that I've sewn the 2 short ends is I'm actually going to fold this in half, putting the interfacing to the inside. Now it's stiff because I interfaced this whole thing, but I'm going to do it like this and fold it in half, matching up my side seams. So it's going to get folded in half like this. All right, so I'm going to take this and my bottom and my straps. So I'm going to first start with the straps. Here's the bottom of my bag. Here's where it's sewn shut. And I'm going to take a strap, right side strap, and I'm actually putting the strap in all the way down here, which will make sense in a minute. So I'm going to put the strap in, and I need to measure. I want to make sure I measure over and get them even. Pin it down. Make sure you don't twist your straps. Whoops. And once you get one side pinned, you can see where your straps are, and it makes it very easy to mirror it to the other side. Strap, pin to that side, and now I'm going to do the other strap the same way. So here's my bottom, and I've got straps pinned on each side, right sides together. I'm going to now take this, and it doesn't matter which side, both sides are right side. I'm going to line up my side seam of this to the side seam of the bag, so it's going to fit down inside the bag like this. Side seam to side seam. So I'm pinning through both layers. So it's getting pinned in like that. Whoops, my husband is shopping for me. Yay! He's getting the last piece of the puzzle for this project. All right, so now that I've pinned in my side seams, I'm just going to keep pinning all of these layers together like this, and it sandwiches the handle in there. And once it's pinned, we're going to stitch all the way around. And because I'm serging and sewing, I can just serge this around. Or what I think I'm going to do though is I'm going to sew it a little deeper and then serge it so that it's just really stable and strong. But that way I keep all of my seam allowances enclosed in the stitches of the serging, and I have a very strong seam for the bag because the handle is actually suspended from the center of the bag, which we'll stitch down at the end. I'll show you from the inside, okay? And there's a handle sandwiched in between all those layers, all right sides together. So we're going to stitch and serge really quickly. So I have serged and straight stitched around that seam, so now I can pop this up. So this is the inside of the bag. So right now, we don't have kitty ears. See, it's a very plain tote at the bottom. Can you see that? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do my kitty ears, so I'm going to flip it back to the inside. But I want to show you, here's my handle. See where the handle hangs from? I'm actually going to stitch down the handle into the plaid, and then this part's going to stick up, so it'll be very sturdy. So this handle's going to get top stitched right in here to hold it down, and I think I'm actually going to go through and top stitch along this seam too. Everywhere you top stitch reinforces it. So I'm going to sew some kitty ears and do some top stitching. I might even top stitch around the top here, and I'll do that. This will be the first top stitching I do before I stitch down the handles or anything else probably. So I'm going to do all of those little things, kitty ears and top stitching, and we'll have another finished bag. Look at our cute little bag. Isn't that cute? From scraps. Napkins and placemats. And they weren't even meant to go together, but hey, I think we could use them together. So here's our little bag. I top stitched this edge. I top stitched this seam down. And then I went around and reattached my straps up here at the top, and I really stitched back and forth quite a few times to make them nice and sturdy. So perfect size for shopping. I haven't stitched this down. See, this is open. And then look, you could put an umbrella in there. See how cute that is? But you could also stitch it down and not have that hang there if you want to. But that's a perfect place for a little umbrella to go in. So here's one bag. Here's the other. Okay, there's only one thing left that's completely optional, and I'm waiting for my husband to come home from the store with it. So I'm just going to hold up our two little bags. All right, I have one more little trick. The bags are completely sewn, and it's this. Now, normally I go to Dollar Tree, and you can buy a little pack of these super cheap flimsy cutting mats for $1, and I think there's usually 3 in there. They're just right for cutting to make a bottom for your bag, like a nice sturdy bottom that you can just set inside your bag. You can pull it right out when you want to wash the bags, but it gives you stability. It keeps everything in your bag where you want it to stay. So if you're setting cans and that sort of thing, it works great. Now my husband went and he bought these from Walmart. So these are the flexible cutting mats from Walmart. I don't know how much they cost. I'm assuming around $5 or $6 for 4 mats. So you can have a cutting mat, a little cutting board, and you can also cut false bottoms. So this is what they look like. They're pretty flexible. They're just thin enough that if you have don't use your sewing scissors, but if you have like an industrial or a kitchen shear, that sort of thing, you can cut it. So I just measure the bottom of my bag. These are actually a lot nicer than the ones I get from Dollar Tree. No surprise there. So you're going to measure the bottom of your bag. So like for instance, this one, I measured this across where my little kitty area is, so it's about 4 inches, and then across the bottom here, which is 9.5 inches. So I would cut a little rectangle that's 4 by 9 or 9.5, and I could put in the bottom of this one. This is the one that I really want the false bottom or the little bottom in, and this one it's almost exactly the length of the cutting mat. So if I cut the cutting mat down just about a 5-inch strip this way, and the regular length of the cutting mat, it's good to go. Now I could put red in there, that actually look cute, but I probably would put the yellow. The Dollar Tree ones are kind of clearish. They don't have as much pigment as these. Like these you can't see through. You can kind of see through the ones at the Dollar Tree. So I'm going to cut a bottom for this really quick, and then I'll show you what that looks like. My husband is upstairs making lunch right now. Can you see my pencil line on there? I'm just going to cut down that. And you can see these nice little rounded corners. I might go ahead and try rounding the corner. We'll see if that even works. Curve up that little corner just so it's not sharp. There. So there's my bottom, and it just sits down in the bag. I have a more secure bottom. When I put things in it, it'll make it more sturdy. And from the inside, you see it just hanging out down there in the bottom, the yellow? Perfect. Okay, that's the last little trick I have for you when you're making bags like this. I love this. This actually, I could see putting my yarn in this if I'm making an afghan or something and taking it with me. I think this is super cute. Here's our fun little shopping bags. All right, we'll see you next time for another fun project.